Hey guys, my name is Moon and welcome back for more Witch on the Holy Night. So last episode, we went to Kitsy Land with Sojiro so he can meet with Alko, right? But yeah, he got attacked. Alko was chasing him all around Kitsy Land, trying to end him, but then something appeared. A new enemy of sorts, right? So let us check it out and let's see what happens in today's episode. An unusual figure with 2 arms and 2 legs stood silently in the darkness. If only for a moment, its beauty, which was even apparent from afar, dulled the insanity of the current situation. Extend, extend, extend. The utterly unknown threat made Alko freeze on the spot. Avoiding it didn't even occur to her. Humans possess intelligence and knowledge, but when confronted with the unknown, they fail to process what to do. And I mean, true though. When you see something that you you haven't seen, you would pause for a second there and be like, what is that? And sometimes it might be too late. And she got hit. She got hit in the back. A shriek escaped Alko's mouth. The magical attack crossed the 30-foot gap in an instant. Look at that. The arm of the girl who had appeared at the rear of the corridor was slender and quick. It extended to near impossible length, striking Alko from behind. Alko crushed into the wall as she fought back, an anguished whimper. The attacker retracted her arm. Sojiro sprang to his feet. He darted to her side and used all the strength he could muster to get her to her feet. He could not believe how light she was. In Sojiro's mind, Alko was an extraordinary individual. He'd expected that if he were to ever touch her, it would be apparent she was far stronger than he. But in reality, she felt about as heavy as he would expect a 100-pound girl to feel. Honestly, this thing is terrifying. It's like, you know the pink-haired girl in Elfen Lied, right? And it's a puppet? That kind of scary. Meanwhile, that thing continued to reel in its arms as if it were some sort of mechanism. Having extended more than 30 feet from the elbow joint, it clanked as it returned to its previous shape and size. Alko tore her hand away from Sojiro. Suddenly, she felt her knees buckle from under her, but Sojiro caught her before she could hit the ground and help her to her feet. He looked back at the eerie shadow 30 feet away as it finished retracting its arm. Alko grabbed her lower back as she answered. A searing pain shot through her. Alko tried to steady her breathing as she asserted or assessed the damage done to her back. The pain was quick to fade and her breathing returned to normal. For the time being, her motor functions were no longer hindered, which meant the real damage was elsewhere.
Azaki,
分かってるわ。黙ってて。
Blue light glowed across the gloom. The magical energy generated by her breathing was accumulating in her right arm. If magical energy was the fuel, the formula was the igniter. For Aoko, this was little more than a reenactment of 2 evenings ago. The next time the puppet extended its arm, Aoko would fire a magic bullet as fast as she could. A battle at approximately 30 feet. As long as Aoko could secure a 2-second window, she could create a counterattack to end their duel. It made its move. With its head tilted down, there was no expression to be seen, and in the darkness, its apparent age was impossible to make out. To the 2 humans, the puppet was not dissimilar to a faceless ghost. But yeah, definitely someone is controlling this, right? But who? Its left arm slowly came up with a grinding sound. Remember the girl that Sojiro saw in the pachinko place? Maybe that girl, right? That woman there. Maybe that's the one. Maybe it followed Sojiro. Its movements were dull, as if the joints were rusty. The right arm, which had been extended earlier, hung at its side. Though the puppet's mouth was hidden by its long locks, the sense was that it was smiling.
さっきと用途が違う。あれが本命。しずきくん、どいて。
She threw herself into Sojiro and extending her hand, its arm extended at the very moment. The timing was impeccable. In a single second, Aoko's magic bullet scored a direct hit on the puppet's arm, reversing its trajectory and sending it crashing into the puppet's body with a violent explosion. Or at least, this is what would have happened had the magic formula been invoked. She barely avoided being struck once again. When Magecraft and her Magecraft failed her, intuition took over and she just managed to get away.
やられた。最初のはそういうことか。
She clenched her teeth in frustration, her thoughts racing a mile a minute. Fight or flight? If it only had one arm left, which would take time to retract. This was the best shot Aoko had at defeating it. If she could evade the right arm just a fraction, she could get close enough to.
Vivo insomni, solitare putresque inferis. Ictius meus obitus dies, et meus nativus dies. Teobeam.
Who the hell is this? A crackle echoed through the corridor, the poetic murmurs containing enough magical energy for a mage to perceive. The verse itself was Latin, but it contained hints of the language of a curse. Gander. Yes, Gander, I remember that word. Originally, there were words meant to curse a hated adversary. However,
Mea animae mortalis, ote meftura negata sunt. Manes sum, animam definire ambiguum est. Teode et te am, conveniamus insomnio ipso.
the puppet was directing the words at itself. Wait, is the puppet the one talking? Curses beget curses. The victim calls down a curse on the assailant, creating a vicious cycle of negativity. The incantation was meant to do just that. However, this was ultimately a one-puppet show. An unprecedented source of power akin to auto-intoxication. Unbelievable as it seemed, the cycle of curses had been turned into a perpetual motion device.
何それレベル高すぎじゃない
Aoko abandoned the idea of digging her heels in. It was time to flee with all due haste.
何してんのあんたも来る
She grabbed Sojiro's hand and ran as fast as she could deeper into the realm of mirrors. The crackling voice continued its murmuring behind him.
Proximi mich negligentes ferunt. Omnes nos peccantes fims. Et omnes nos edem fims. Omnes nos peccatores sums. Venit domum meum. Lut simile somnium. Et pulvere simile quotidianum. Corruprebo. Te judico.
Dude, this thing is actually scary though. What is this? Aoko fought against the pain in her back as she ran through the mirrored corridor. She dragged Sojiro by the hand.
青崎、傷は
別に背骨がしびれてる程度よ。内臓は平気だし出血もないみたい。
She cursed inwardly at how much of a mess she felt though. Unlike Sojiro, Aoko did not run into any transparent walls. Thanks not to the superior sight, but rather preparation, she'd hammered the layout of the building into her memory.
平気ってわかるのか？
そりゃ自分の体だもの。身体管理は基礎中の基礎よ。
Aoko's matter-of-fact answer contrasted with Sojiro's nervous questioning. The corridor grew shorter with each and every left turn. At first, they were able to advance in a straight line for about 100 feet at a time. But by now, they were forced to turn a corner every 50 feet or so.
あいつはあの夜の
多分ね。同じタイプだと思う。貴重なオートマタを惜しげもなく使い捨てるなんて、よっぽどお金持ちなんだろうけど。
Sojiro furrowed his brows. He was grateful that she was answering his questions, but baffled by the strange words she was using.
青崎ストップ。もう随分走ったぞ。
Stop.
あいつは曲がり角一つ分向こうだ。少し休もう。
His words suggested that he was still concerned about her injuries. Aoko shook her head in irritation.
あの距離を狙ってくる相手に通路一つ分のリードは無意味よ。せめて二つ分に行くまで走るの。
Sojiro nodded. With that matter settled, he asked,
なんで俺を連れて行ってるんだ？
逃げられたくないからじゃない、バカ。
Answering curtly, Aoko glared at her naive prey. The two of them headed for the next corner. Their legs began to slow as they rounded one more. Aoko rubbed her back as she tried to catch her breath. Though Aoko had insisted that she was fine, it appeared to have been bravado. Even the usually clueless Sojiro felt the desperation they were in. He stood behind Aoko with his arms folded. While they had a moment, he tried to make sense of everything. First, Aoko had nearly killed him. Though he was saved at the last possible second, it was by the strange, stretchy woman Aoko had burned to ashes 2 nights prior. He could barely make it out that night, but he considered it a her because it looked female. The woman's attack wounded Aoko's back and forced her to flee. Aoko had taken Sojiro with her, claiming that the reason she did so was to prevent her prey from escaping. In other words,
青崎はまだ諦めてないんだな。
nice face.
当たり前よ。あんなやつ、仮に2体と半分始末しても、あんた用の余力は残せるわ。
Her tone was sharp, but even Sojiro could see that she was struggling to stay confident. The damage to her body was too much to afford any optimism. Still, the fury in her eyes refused to accept her circumstances.
中がところどころショートしてる。 あの右腕は回路を混戦させるジャミングってわけね。
Though the proper response would have been for her to tremble in fear, she did nothing but shake her fist in anger. We need Alice. Yes, we need Alice right now. The disruption of formulae was only supposed to work on absolute beginners. If it had been her roommate, the arm would have been repelled the instant it hit her. The attacker's circuits burnt out rather than her own. Attempting to establish a link to the magic circuits of another mage was like presenting your heart on a silver platter. It would be of no use in a battle against a superior mage. And yet her adversary had been designed to do just that. Coupled with the attacks on areas of Misaki under Aoko's jurisdiction these last few weeks, it was a clear statement from the enemy who as of 2 days ago had revealed itself as a fellow mage. In other words, the puppet saw Aoko as no threat at all.
敵ながら正確な判断だこと。
While she was still angry, the whirlwind of emotions within her started to fade. Her face was that of a hunter far beyond her years.
なんか俺の時より真剣だな。
まあね、あんたの時は遊びが入ってたし。
Sojiro was not sure whether to be happy or sad at that.
わからないことだらけで何を聞いていいかわからないんだけど、一つだけいいか。
Aoko didn't respond. Her eyes were focused on the darkness before them. The silence was heavy and the darkness was like a noose closing in on them. But Sojiro continued in spite of her indifference.
青崎はあいつも殺すのか。
A silence fell over them. It was as if the gloom was pulling them in. No response. Their breathing was that was the only sound echoing in the dim corridor. There stood Sojiro, forcing her to confront her sins and the magician girl who continued to ignore him. They spent a few seconds seemingly frozen in time.
そう。それがあなたのキーワードみたいね。
Aoko whispered in a lifeless tone. Her sigh was tinged with both resignation and contempt.
何？
独り言よ、忘れて。それと、言っとくけど、あいつは人間じゃないわ。信じられないだろうけど、自分の意志で動く人形なの。この前のも、今のやつもね。
Sojiro nodded as he processed the information. Not only did he not doubt her story, but he seemed to have accepted it at face value.
なんか落ち着いてるわね、あなた。
まさかもう何が何だかわからないからあまり考えないことにしてるだけだ。ただ人形に関しては別にどうということはない。
え、もしかして他でも自動人形を見たことあるとか？
都会の人形ってああいうものじゃないのか？
Look at her face. She barely stopped herself from falling to her knees. Of course, how could she have forgotten? She was dealing with a bona fide and natural-born moron. As a student who transferred from the isolation of the mountains like an endangered species, his utter lack of common sense rendered anything miraculous as mundane. If automobiles were moving hunks of metal, then moving puppets were nothing to write home about. Wait, that meant to him the incident from the other night hadn't been extraordinary at all. He might have even assumed it was an everyday occurrence in the city. I mean, I guess, yeah, from someone from the mountains and yeah, you going there, sure it's gonna be something new. But you might think that, oh, maybe this happens all the time, right? Maybe this is a city thing.
参った。いっぺん頭の中覗いてみたいっていうか、ほんと、ここまで来ると感心するわ。 調子が狂うのも当然だった。普通は私に襲われた時点でもっと違う反応をするはずなのに。化け物とかお化けとかさ。でもあなたにとってはそういうこともあるで済まされてたわけなんだ。なんかバカみたいね、私。
Her strained face returned to normal for a moment. It hit her there had been another way to handle this without anyone getting hurt, but the damage had already been done. There were no do-overs in life, nor should there be. Her own mistakes, assumptions had sent the situation spiraling out of control. But now that Sojiro was involved, she had to make sure that her secret was safe with him. Even if there had been another better option, that ship has sailed. Human relationships were ultimately driven by mutual understandings, like tapestries woven from mismatched intentions. Okay, what happens now? They're gonna go back there. Break time was over. There stood Aoko Aozaki and Sojiro Shizuki. The first idle conversation they had since first meeting had come to an end. Not that they had a choice in the matter, but it was jarring murmuring from around the corner that cut it short.
Nemo nus memnit, vedroit extinct sest. Initio eraberamus dom brevimus dolores sunt. Nemo adiuvat.
Honestly, if you look at this puppet, the hair, right? It looks like Aoko's hair. Yeah, kind of similar, right? Yeah, just a little bit different color, I guess. The enemy was just around the corner, visible in the mirrors parallel to it.
悠長に話してる場合じゃないわね。とにかく今は距離を。
Yeah, look at this hair and look at the puppet's hair. In contrast to Ako's elegant blues, the lights were malicious red.
感動打ち。
There was a momentary flash of light before she even extended her arm. But the instant she saw the enemy, her dormant feelings erupted once more.
さっきから邪魔なのよ。
She channeled all of her pent-up anger and shunted it into her right arm. The fog that filled the corridor was no magical weaving, but rather a barrier of raw energy. It was equivalent to setting blaze 3 buckets of gasoline to create a wall of fire in the hope it would stop an arrow in flight. If the puppet had attacked with its arm, it could have pierced such a wall easily, but because it had a loose curses with no definite form, the wall of energy repelled the attack. While it was a huge waste of magical energy, it was the only means Aoko had to protect herself in that very moment. Unfortunately, its protection was reserved to Aoko alone, so your boy Sojiro got hit. Sojiro held his hand to his mouth. While the curse had been weakened to the point where Aoko could no longer feel it, it had plenty of effect on Sojiro, who was not a mage. As if it understood this fact, the puppet turned its gaze from Aoko to the unanticipated human behind her.
こいつは関係ないでしょ。
Enraged, she swung her arm forward once again. The blue light formed a wall to block the gun there for a few seconds. It was enough of an opening to exploit. Just as Aoko was forming the wall, the puppet pointed its right arm at her.
関係あるみたいだから逃げるぞ。
Before the rocket of death could be fired, Sojiro scooped her up into his arms. How he mustered the strength to do so was a mystery, but he turned his back on the puppet and took off running. He was a nimble sprinter, resembling a deer leaping across obstacles. Sojiro rounded 2 more corners. ignored whatever complaints Aoko was making, and eventually stopped in the middle of the second floor. He sat her down.
よし、ここまで来れば少しは休めるな。
Sojiro's shoulders heaved as he caught his breath. As light as she was, running while carrying someone else would make anyone winded. She looked up at him in incomprehension. Sorry.
こんな体力あったのに、なんで？
It made no sense to her. If he had the stamina to pick her up and run, surely he could have stood up and escaped when he had been downed earlier.
ああ、あの時は諦めてたから。
His words were unfiltered as ever, though in this moment, fighting for their lives, he lacked some of his usual absent-mindedness.
諦めてたってどうして？
さあ、忘れた、そんなことは。
Though he may have turned away because he regretted saying it aloud, his words spoke volumes. For some reason, it pained Aoko to seem like that.
それより青崎、唐突に気分が悪いんだが、あの赤い光も、
ええ、魔術の類よ。ガンド打ちって言ってね。北欧の呪詛の一つ。魔術回路のある私には効かないけど。
なんだ、青崎には効かないのか。じゃあ、危ないのはあの腕だけだな。
Aoko had no idea why he was relieved, but she gritted her teeth and fought down the urge to snap at him. There was no use in yelling at a time like this. Above all, she felt that it would have been petty in the extreme to voice her annoyance right now.
そうね。注意するのは伸ばしてくる腕だけ。大した相手じゃないわ、やっぱり。
This time, it was not false bravado. Such an enemy would normally be a breeze for Aoko Aozaki. But her shameful negligence had led to the disruption of her magic circuits, making her even less formidable than her enemy. At this point, Aoko had no way of attacking. The only option left to her was to wait for it to expend all of its magical energy, but its perpetual curse mechanism made it a non-starter. This game of tag would not end until one of them was dead. She realized that she was in the same position she had cornered Sojiro in earlier. She glanced at her right arm. She could not imagine how she had gotten into such a mess with her magical energy at more than half of its capacity. This had to be karma for having enjoyed toying with Sojiro earlier.
呆れた。いるところにはいるものね、神様って。
She grumbled under her breath as she shifted her focus. She had the fuel for the fire, but not the igniter. And that killing machine would chase her until the end of time if need be. What should she do next was blindingly clear. She had to get back to normal.
青崎。
ごめん、考え事してた。確か。よし、合ってる。しずきくん、そこに横道あるのわかる？
あ？
Aoko pointed, but he could see nothing but walls of the corridor. For one thing, the floor had nothing but left turns and Aoko was pointing to the right.
2階は中心まで行くと1階に降りる階段があるんだけど、それは私が壊したから使えないの。けど、ここの作りも意地が悪くてね。よく見れば、右に曲がる通路もあるのよ。上級者だけにわかる抜け道ってやつ。あとは注意して探せば、1階の階段までショートカットできる。
Aoko turned her back to Sojiro and started walking. Walking in the opposite direction of the escape route and down the long corridor toward the puppet in pursuit.
あいつは無差別だから、ここで壊さないといけない。魔術師は魔術師同士で争うのはいいんだけど、みだりに一般人に手を出しちゃいけないって決まりがあるの。あいつの目的は私のわけだし、 結果がどうあれすっきりするでしょ。
If Aoko won, the puppet would be destroyed. If Aoko lost, its objective would be complete and it would shut down. Either way, them going their separate ways would mean Sojiro survived. This is what Aoko meant. Though she explained as if the events were happening to two totally different people.
運が良ければ入り口までたどり着けるわ。それじゃあまた明日ね。
She was trying to kill him earlier and now she's like, yeah, she's trying to save him now and yeah, see you tomorrow then. Even Sojiro could tell she was just trying to act tough. True, yeah, because yeah, you don't know if you're gonna survive this or not. But she had already disappeared around the corner by the time he thought to stop her. Mentally, Aoko bemoaned the disaster she was in. The quality of this puppet was on a completely different level compared to the one from the park 2 days ago. An auto-incanting perpetual motion machine was a rarity in and of itself, but this puppet was also equipped for battle with its extending arms and gander projecting crystalline eyes. It was a first-class product that, if put on the market, would sell hundreds of millions of yen. Although that was only when factoring in its value as an antique. For the purpose of combat, it would have made more sense to mobilize a significantly less expensive familiar. To use such a precious commodity as a tool for murder marked this puppet's master as a completely different breed of crazy from the enemies she had faced up until now.
Vivo insomn, solitare putores cuniferis. Ictius meus obitus dies, et meus nativus dies. Teobeam.
来たわね。
A sound of a crackling music box filled the air. The automata, animated by its own curses, approached. The corridor measured approximately 30 feet in length. Aoko lay in wait around the corner further down the hall, anticipating the puppet's appearance. This was not to buy Sojiro time to escape, far from it. Aoko had concluded that she couldn't make a break for it under the current circumstances. Even if she did try to escape and by some miracle made it out of the House of Mirrors, that was as far as she would go. Outside with no cover, Aoko would quickly be overtaken and skewered from behind. As long as her magecraft was disabled, escape was impossible. Instead, she chose to force the enemy back. Her situation was not the most favorable, but neither was the puppet's. Though this narrow hall gave Aoko no place to run, it in turn prevented the puppet from reaching full speed. That was the weak point of this machine. Automata of its era had a tendency to struggle with minute changes in speed.
セット。
She flowed energy into her shorted circuits. Her blood flow and magical energy supply were unstable. It would be difficult to construct a formula in this state. All she could do was harden her right arm by imbuing it with as much energy as she could. Doing so turned her arm into an improvised weapon like a hammer or a bat. Assuming she could manage to get into close combat range, this was the best she could do. All she needed to do now was a plan of attack. The question wasn't what weapon to use, but how to use the weapon she had. The simplest way would use the mirror's reflection to hide and rush the puppet. I guess. It did not have a sense of sight in the first place. The puppet's view of the world around it did not stem from visual feedback but from mapping the topography of its surroundings. In theory, it was the same as a bat's echolocation. The environment could be measured based on the emission and return of high frequency sound waves. Those channels served as sensor pulses as far as the puppet was concerned. The mirrors were no better than transparent panes, making even the thought of an ambush laughable.
近づけば近づくほどよりリアルに察知される。本当は遠距離からの狙撃が最適なんだけど、ガンドを撃ってくるならフィンの一撃ぐらい隠してるわよね。
Gondar was a Scandinavian in origin, and in considering its simplicity, highly versatile. As a single-action magecraft, it was limited, so only causing illness, but there was a secret technique that's said to be the greatest mastery of the Gondar shot. The Fin shot. It could do more than cause a simple illness. It was a deadly curse that could stop the heart. The wound on her back set her nerves on fire. On an unarmed girl and a deadly automaton, it was clear that she was the one destined for death. She considered her slim chance of survival when... Oh no, what is that? A vision sent chills down her spine. Quietly, using everything she could to clamp down on the feeling, Aoko faced her all too familiar illusion. She clenched her teeth to keep them from making a deafening clatter. But there, the sensation of fingers crawling up her neck behind her, the specter stared and laughed. This alone made Aoko want to bolt. On top of it all, when Aoko tried to mentally simulate the coming fight, she estimated a 2 in 10 chance of dying in the first 5 seconds. Jesus. 20% at times, her predictions were harsher than reality. If Aoko fought the puppet 10 times, she would die twice. She could not stop herself from visualizing her own corpse. She imagined herself collapsing, crumpling under the puppet's curse. Her eyeballs swollen like a blowfish, blood and other fluids oozing from every bodily orifice. 1 in 5. 1 in 5. A 1 in 10 chance of death was bad enough, but 1 in 5? It drove her crazy. Aoko forced down her heart as it tried to escape from her mouth. Taking a deep breath, she peered at her own reflection. She thought back to the white night half a year ago. This, she decided, was nothing compared to that. 6 months ago at the Kuonji estate. The Hound of White Roses, the Wonder Snatch. Wonder Snatch? That appeared from within the thick fog had killed Aoko 100 times out of 10.
Me animam brutalis, otem eftura negata sunt. Manes sum, animam definira ambiguum est.
A dark curse shattered Aoko's dream. It was only 30 feet away. The puppet rounded the corner. Either side stood in the shadows, their forms indistinct. The puppet gave no warning. Without preamble, it swiftly fired a Gondar barrage. Just as Aoko had planned, the curses fizzled out as they hit her, mist-like barrier of magical energy. The protection would only last a few seconds, giving her just enough time to... Its stretchable spear sprang toward Aoko's face. Bingo! The lethal weapon grazed her cheek. All her experience analyzing puppet attack patterns gave her the wherewithal to evade the attack by a hair's breadth. It was one thing if a puppeteer were pulling the strings, but an autonomous doll had their limitations. Aoko had bet everything on this killing machine following a predefined template. The puppet would use a given attack for a given range, and she could adjust her tactics to that. Before its arm had a chance to fully retract, she charged the puppet. It was a risky gamble, but her overall chances were slim to begin with. The scales tipped in her favor. If her predictions were correct, there were two ways she would die. One was from a fin shot fired at that range. Dude, the puppet literally looks like her. And the other? The other was if the puppet attack pattern was beyond her ability to foresee. Instantaneous mass transfer, otherwise known as mass displacement. Immediately after Aoko dodged the puppet's arm, something smashed into her abdomen. The head-on collision from its shoulder felt like a rocket. But where had the ability to prepare itself come from? Puppets like this were not built to have the ability to jet around like that. Doing everything in her power to stay conscious in spite of the pain, Aoko could just make out what had happened. It was pulled, so someone is there now, I guess. Yes, the puppet's arm had not returned to its body. It was lodged in the wall and it reeled itself from the other direction. Okay, so yeah, that puppet is very smart. Okay, so I thought someone was there, but no, it was just a puppet that it's just too good in battle. Swallowing her surprise, she hastily pulled herself back up. Her abdomen, specifically her diaphragm, had been dealt a significant blow. The attack left her disoriented. Thankfully, the puppet was surprisingly lightweight. Her bones and organs were intact, and she had sustained no life-threatening damage. She was having a hard time breathing, though. She was shaken, though she managed to keep her calm. In another 2 seconds, she'd be back on her feet. No, that was 2 seconds too long. She told herself to calm down, that she was already calm. She'd only briefly lost her hearing or bearings. She was fine. She could recover her breath and her vision later if only her body would move.
Intellectus non necessaris est, piusque escat. Nostro racintiabulat fit. Ratio fix tantum est. Dolores nicium cerebrum fit.
Above her, Aoko could hear the warped noise of a powerful force. She could once more feel the touch of death.
E salvatio, e salvatio, e salvatio.
The puppet was so close that Aoko could reach out and touch it. That also meant that it could reach out and kill Aoko. By intuition alone, Aoko rolled over to the puppet's right flank. Its arm was still embedded within the wall. From here, it could not attack, so she made the right decision and her dizziness faded.
Intellectus non necessaris est, piusque escat. Nostro racintiabulat fit. Ratio fix tantum est. Dolores nicium cerebrum fit.
Aoko pulled herself back up. It was her turn. Oh my god, look at that face. It was only an instant. Within its labyrinth of mirrors, she saw an image of herself.
Be salvatio.
A blinding, brilliant light flashed. Lacerations appeared across the walls. At the last moment, Aoko managed to take in the magical energy running through her veins into a primitive form of magecraft resistance. It just barely saved her life from what must have been the puppet's ace in the hole. The puppet bore a striking resemblance to Aoko. This powerful curse was not satisfied with stopping Aoko's heart, but destroying her entire being. Aoko did not even have the time to be shocked. This was her chance for a counterattack. The puppet's balance was unsteady, its right arm is still embedded in the wall. Aoko prepared to give its defenseless body a strong kick, but her knees buckled and she collapsed into a heap on the floor.
Vivo insomni. Solitare putris cuniferis. Ictius meus obitus dies. Et meus natibus dies. Theobeam.
A sudden nausea and lightheadedness overcame Aoko. Her body temperature began to rapidly lower.
こいつ呪いをばらまいてるんだった。
She noticed it too late. The puppet's curses circled the hall. The cursed chant that had the puppet use as a source of power doubled as a defense mechanism, crippling those who drew near with illness. She bore the full brunt of the entire time she was in close proximity to it. Although Aoko had magic circuits, she was succumbing just as Sojiro had. Languidly, she forced her deteriorating body to jump back.
負けるか。
With all energy she could muster, she forced her way past the exhaustion caused by the curse. However, Aoko's blood pressure took a steep nosedive, not from the curse-induced anemia but from what appeared in front of her. They stood in perfect harmony. In front of Aoko was the automata that shared her face, its left arm held out like an arrow. The deadly weapon shot forward and honed in on her heart. Then a moment before it made contact, Sojiro. The moment she heard that fearless voice completely out of place in this storm of violence, Aoko's body was pulled forcefully to one side. Once again, the extending arm cut through empty air. While Puppet quickly retracted its left arm, Sojiro took the brief opportunity to take Aoko by the hand and flee at full speed. Okay, saved by Sojiro this time. How can they even defeat this thing though? Sojiro ran through the corridor as fast as he could, only stopping when he had to put enough distance between them and the puppet.
その考えてみると
Though he had saved her, she looked angry rather than grateful. This did not keep Sojiro from saying his piece.
明日はどうも忙しいみたいなんだ
Okay, it's gonna be a really busy day, so he needs to go home now? In other words, let's finish this today. A rather awkward proposal. Aoko remained silent. She was also rather angry. Not that she could not figure what made him tick, nor because he returned after escaping, not even because he was spouting his typical airheaded lines. It was, she supposed, that instant, the fact that when he grabbed her hand, her mind had gone completely blank. Aoko found it unforgivable. which beckoned the response.
あなた、正気？
In the heat of the moment, she blurted it out, or blurted it before she could stop herself.
それとも自殺願望でもあったわけ？私もあいつも、あんたなんか殺す対象に過ぎないのよ。少なくとも、恩を売る相手じゃない。言っとくけど、私、助けられたぐらいで曲がる信念は持ち合わせていないから。
Sojiro nodded, clearly unperturbed.
青崎がそんな可愛らしいもんじゃないのは、この夜だけで骨身に染みてるよ。
She found herself slightly offended.
けど君は勘違いをしてるから、少し正そう。あいつの狙いは青崎だけじゃない。君だけじゃなく、俺も殺す気だと思う。
She was having none of it. Her eyes shot daggers his way.
話は最後まで聞く。どうしてかっていうと、1階の入り口あるだろ？あの細長い通路。なんでかあそこから先に進めないんだ。逃げたくても逃げ出せなくて、仕方なく戻ってきた。
Aoko's eyes widened ever so slightly in amazement. Not out of shock, but rather admiration that her enemy would go to such lengths.
それに、さっきので完全に敵扱いされた。あの人形、こっちをじろっと睨んできたし。いや、一瞬でよく見えなかったけど、生きた心地しなかったな。青崎も気をつけた方がいい。多分よっぽど怖い顔をしているに違いないぞ、あれ。
それはご親切にどうも。
うん。なんでこれはもう他人事じゃないんだ。青崎と人形、結論としてどっちが勝っても俺は殺されてしまうんじゃないか？
Whichever of you wins, I'm a dead man either way. Dude, if Aqua still tries to kill him after this, come on, don't do that.
そうね。そこまでやってるなら、目撃者は消すでしょうね。私みたいに。
だろ？でも、俺はあいつには殺されたくない。
え？
His words were decisive. As Aoko looked up at him, she could swear he was trying to encourage her. It was then that she realized Sojiro was looking even worse than before.
ちょっと待って。大丈夫なの？あなた。
まあ、醤油を一升瓶飲むよりはマシではないかと。
He tried to make light of the situation, but his forehead was clearly drenched in sweat.
そうか。さっき人形に近づいたから。
How could he possibly be able to withstand a curse that made even Aoko nauseous? She bit her lip, annoyed at herself for not noticing this earlier. Sojiro was such an airhead that she hadn't even paused to consider his plight.
下で隠れていようとか思わなかったの？その方がどう考えても安全でしょ？
But it's quite funny though. Like, yes, I've watched Fate Stay Zero, Fate Stay Night, right? And yeah, in Fate Stay Night, you got Emiya or Shiro, right? And they got Rin. Kind of both of them the same situation as these two, right? Yeah, Rin has the power and Shiro, yeah, he doesn't have any, right? So kind of the same. You could see, right? You could see that. Yes. She really couldn't understand him at all.
それは青崎が言うセリフじゃないな。でもまあ、長話をしている時間もない。そろそろ追いついてくる頃だ。
He turns to look down the corridor. The crackling sounds of a music box can be heard creeping forth from the darkness.
さっき1階にいて考えたんだ。君がやられても俺は殺される。なら、まず奴をどうにかするべきだ。
あなた、何が言いたいの？
She asked a question to which she already knew the answer. She did it to put him to test. If he wavered even a little, she would have killed him where he stood.
提案。あいつをやっつけるのに協力したら、俺のことは見逃してくれる？
助けられたぐらいじゃ信念は曲げないって言ったでしょ。それに、あなたに何ができるっていうの？
それは青崎が考えてくれ。得意だろ、そういうの。
The commander, who had the overall picture, was responsible for delegating roles to their teammates. It was futile to depend on someone who was unable to grasp a situation or evaluate the enemy's strength. Sojiro was proud to share that he knew this. He spoke the truth. Aoko was the only one who knew both Sojiro and the automata. That was why he pointed out that following her orders to the best of his ability was the only thing he could do. It may have seemed as though Sojiro had surrendered his capacity for self-thought, but in fact, in accepting that he was helpless, he was in fact giving Aoko his complete trust.
じゃあ、私の指示に 100% 従うってこと？
ああ。それに、これは恩とか義理の話じゃない。一人だと分が悪いから二人でかかるだけだ。善意でも好意でもない。取引って言わないか、こういうの。
His eyes sparkled as if this was bartering in its truest form.
まったく。
This child must have learned that from Tobimaru, Aoko thought. Though she refused to let him see it, underneath she cracked a smile. Sure, he had gotten the best of her just now. But there were times when defeat was not the worst outcome in the world.
労働と報酬ってわけね。それなら理にかなってる。うん。言いたくないけど。
She relaxed her shoulders and sighed. Her face cracked into a wicked smile as if her fears had suddenly washed away.
それ、結構私の好みよ。
Aoko repaid Sojiro's trust in equal measure. Okay.
結構きついかもね。あなたの役目。
I mean, it definitely is gonna be. The only thing Sojiro has is his courage. Aoko warned Sojiro, moving as fast as she could without her foot sails causing a din of noise. Sojiro remained near the center of the spiral maze on the second floor.
実を言うと、もう一つ用意しておいた仕掛けがあるの。自分でもやりすぎだって呆れたもんだけど、あなたがここに来るのが遅かったから。
ん？仕掛けって俺用の？
Sojiro tilted his head like a squirrel as Aoko freely discussed the final ace up her sleeve.
地下の柱に着火型のちょっとした魔術式を刻んでおいたの。中心の柱に点火することで連鎖的に他の柱に仕掛けた魔術も起動する。
So the plan is basically gonna drop the whole building at that puppet.
ジャミングを食らう前に作ったものだから直接魔力を叩き込めば一気にこういくわ。
Sojiro was a little unsettled by how unclear that last bit was.
青崎、こうじゃわからない。できるだけ明確にどこまで爆破する気だったのか白状してくれ。
She's definitely gonna blow up that whole building.
あと、もしかして俺早まったか？
いや、単なる保険っていうか、追いかけっこの途中であんたを見失ったらいっそ建物ごと爆破しちゃおうかなって。
I could blow the whole building and you with it. So no escape. It was her policy to be thorough to the end. After all, she laughed in embarrassment, saying it out loud though.
いくらなんでも徹底しすぎてる。
Faced with Aoko's cruelty, Sojiro forgot about the situation at hand and protested from the bottom of his heart.
何よ、いいじゃない。そのおかげでなんとかなりそうなんだから。
She shot back. Aoko dashed down the corridor, mumbling things that probably would have sent Sojiro packing if he heard him. The strategy was simple. Aoko would use the escape route to the right and avoid the puppet while making her way down the basement. Upon reaching the central pillar, she would infuse a formula she had prepared with magical energy and escape. Once ignited, it would take about a minute for the chain reaction to spread throughout the whole house of mirrors, and another minute for the building to collapse. She would be cutting it a little close, but because she had committed the maze of memory, she was sure she could make it out in time. Aoko assumed that the chain reaction caused by the pillar would clear the barrier that the puppet had placed at the entrance. And even if it was strong enough to withstand the blast, it would not be able to stay standing. Once the foundation buckled, Sojiro's escape was assured as long as the formula in the basement was activated. Next came the most important part. The automaton was at disadvantage in the obstacle-laden house of mirrors and was unable to move at full speed. If it was near the center of the second floor when the building collapsed, it would be caught up and crushed in it. So the problem was keeping the puppet on the second floor until Aoko could make it down the basement.
当てにしたからね、しずきくん。せめて3分ぐらいは引きつけて。
Ideally, he would be able to keep it busy until she could activate the formula. If that failed to work, him luring it down to the first floor would be the next best thing. She understood perfectly well the danger she was putting Sojiro in, but his lucky streak and running speed were nothing to scoff at.
ただ逃げるだけなら、もしかしてとんでもないことをしてくれるかも、あいつ。
Aoko made her way through the hidden passage of the maze, her hopes pinned on Sojiro. Meanwhile, well out of earshot, Sojiro was readying himself for another desperate chase. He calmed his beating heart using a method of his own making. What mattered most was that he remained calm. The plan was simple enough. And Aoko's orders were succinct, how do you say that? And easy to understand.
10メートルぐらいの距離を保って、できるだけゆっくり通路を3、4周すること。横道は鏡のつなぎ目で覚えて。ここなら左回りで6、3、7、2枚目にあるから、そこをぐるぐる回ってれば比較的安全よ。
It was essentially a looping marathon. As long as Sojiro maintained a distance of the puppet's extended arm and just enough that she could continue to track him, she should continue chasing him indefinitely. Simple though the task was Sojiro, so it was that Sojiro was putting his life on the line as bait, and then there was a final order to run as fast as he could to the exit when the building began to sway.
結構じゃなくて、かなりきついんじゃないかな、これは。
He nervously stuck his head out from around the corner. He could hear the sound of the music box from the other side of the corridor. First, he had to make eye contact with it, then head through the shortcut on the right and began their game of tag. He spotted it and braced himself. Closer, closer. Fearing that her arm could fly at him at any moment, he went over Aoko's instruction in his head.
あれ?
However, the puppet ain't doing anything. He could not quite remember which pane led to the first hidden passage. Come on, Sojiro. The third, the sixth, the ninth? You're just gonna run for it. No. He was sure that it was mistaken. He was confident he had it memorized moments ago, but his nerves had gotten the best of him. And now his head was now spinning. And then Sojiro realized that the sound of his pursuer was beginning to growing distant. And at an incredible speed,
何？
The unusual silhouette of the puppet astonished him. Before it had taken the form of a beautiful girl, but now it made a bizarre transformation and returned to the first floor to pursue her primary target.
いや、それは。
It basically left him now. Soldier was no longer sure what to do. With not even the time to mourn his failure, the puppet had vanished out of sight. I'll be of help, just let me go. Or so he had said, but now he could not follow through.
さて、自分はこれからどうしよ
Alone, he tilted his head in frustration. He spoke into the darkness as if Aoko would be there to answer him. But yeah. It went to Aoko instead. That very moment, having arrived on the first floor, Aoko quickly understood what had transpired above her. She did not even have to strain her ears to hear the puppet. Even during its heyday, this attraction had never made a sound like the one she heard coming toward her now. It was a sound of despair, as if a horde of monstrous hedgehogs were scraping their way past the mirrors in her direction.
ドジ、3分どころか10秒持たないってどういうことよ。
Rather than buying her time, Sojiro had in fact stolen hers. She had dreamed of cursing him for failing to fulfill his one job.
複数の足音。ってことは、二足から多脚に切り替えたのね。
The echoes made it sound like the footsteps of a dozen feet. To Aoko, it sounded like a giant six-legged spider tearing its way down to the corridor. It was a little wonder that it was so much faster than before. Its perception of its surroundings through echolocation was of particular use in the dark. Compared to the sight-dependent humans, this automaton was far better equipped to navigate its way through the labyrinth of mirrors. If it could not keep pace earlier, it was because its bipedal mode of movement was not up to the task. But the stability provided by multiple legs gave it speed that far exceeded that of any human.
どうする？どうする？どうする？
Her thoughts spun out as she tried to come up with a plan B. All she knew for sure that this was a pivotal moment. If she continued standing still, she had seconds left at most. Even in her current state, she knew she could easily neutralize the bounded field blocking the entrance without casting a spell. All she had to do was pour a little of her own energy into it. Aoko could sprint with all her might for a little more than 3 minutes. The puppet had far more stamina than she did. She could only come up with 3 options. The first was to escape through the exit in front of her. The second was to hide herself somewhere within the far more complicated first floor. And the third was to run into the basement and be stuck like a rat in a trap.
なんだ、考えるまでもない。
She made her decision with zero hesitation. Moving her stiff legs again with determined strength, the oncoming storm was almost upon her. Her resolve firm, she turned and ran, descending into the darkness. No matter what a finale should be, glorious, this would be the Mirror Castle's final scene. 2 humans and a puppet, a young sorcerer, ran toward the subterranean heart of a castle, while an autonomous antique chased its prey into the depths of a demonic dungeon. A minute later, a faint blue charge would ripple through the castle. This was the main pillar in the deepest depths of the basement. The pillar itself was not there to support the castle's structure, but it would serve nicely as the symbol into which the girl thrust her fists with all of her magical energy. This was the blow that would bring down the castle. She imagined the scene as she threw the punch, a scene that would soon become reality. It was simple ignition magecraft meant to release the condensed magical energy engraved into the 4 pillars that formed the foundation of the structure. Using electricity as a switch meant virtually instantaneous activation. Swift and elegant, a hammer of destruction descended upon the castle of dreams that had stubbornly resisted its fate for 2 years. Wait, it fell down now? It was almost a joyous sound, and so the lifeless and abandoned castle of mirror set the stage for its final and most spectacular performance. Aoko's magical energy became an electrical charge that activated the Magecraft formula engraved into the pillar. The chain reaction would lead to the castle's destruction.
ご苦労様。でも、思ってたよりくたびれてたのね。
The plaza in the center of the basement, Aoko tried to steady her breathing while rotating her magic crest at full speed. She wreathed her arms in the blue light, fully aware that she could no longer activate another formula. But then it's here. Dude, that thing is really creepy though. Look at it. Her labored breathing refused to settle as she stood at the center of the basement. Without being spotted even once, she had managed to make it all the way to the central pillar. It was a 100-meter dash in the 13 seconds flat, undoubtedly a new personal best. She spurred on her weakened heart, knowing full well the fate that awaited her.
入れば追ってくる。地下に行けば逃げられない。当然よね。最後まで逃げ回ろうなんて虫のいい話だった。
Hindsight was 2020. The castle was only a minute away from collapsing completely. If they stayed here, they both would be crushed by the rubble. The puppet certainly did not care. With no life of its own, its sole concern was the elimination of its target, Aoko Aozaki. Indeed, the enemy had been willing to die from the start. She resented her own lack of resolve. It wasn't like her to tuck tail and run from an opponent that didn't fear death.
Vivo insomno, solitare putoresque inferis. Ictius meus obitus dies, et meus nativus dies. Te obeam.
そもそも自爆覚悟じゃないあれ。六足歩行とフィンの一撃は使いすぎよ。もう呪詛による魔力補給じゃ間に合わない。
Such a perpetual motion device was only as good as its ability to regulate its energy consumption. Using so many functions at once meant it was burning through the fuel quickly and losing the ability to process the curses that powered it. It was using up all the functions it had been given to achieve its aim. This was the pride of a tool. If such things could have an ego, those endowed with sentience could never hope to understand. A beast born to do nothing but run would burn any human who faced its resolve.
ほんと、もったいない。こういう無茶をするのは姉貴だけかと思ってたけど、いるところにはいるもんね。
But Aoko did not intend a sacrifice play here. She respected her adversary now, and she was done regretting her choices. There was no time to waste.
行くわよ。ここできっかり。
Aoko had every intention of paying it back double for what he had done to her. The energy Aoko had accumulated exploded out of her right leg. She aimed for a single thing, a head-on attack. The enemy's response was a curse to crush her heart. A curse that would rend Aoko's heart and destroy itself in the process. As soon as she saw it, Aoko kicked the floor as hard as she could. Her long hair swirled through the air as she flipped aside. This lateral move almost sent her tumbling to the ground, but a quick swing of her arm allowed her to regain her balance. A shot grazed her arm, with the curse scorching her left shoulder. She did not flinch, and Aoko knew she could hold on as long as she continued to avoid a direct fin shot.
Snap.
Off balance and in pain, it took her half a second to recover. The moment she raised her head, she deflected the attack with a fistful of magical energy.
せーの。
If the puppet had a will of its own, its eyes would have popped right out of its socket. It would have been floored, shocked at the strong will that allowed this girl to perform a series of moves like this. Aoko's response was instantaneous. While her power was not sufficient to completely redirect the arm's trajectory, it was enough to deflect it harmlessly past her hair.
Initio eraberamos ton vivimus dolores sunt. Nemo adiuvat, nemo adiuvat, nemo adiuvat.
Okay, so let's take a break here. Let's cut it. Let's put a little bit of. Let's take a break, and it's fun though. Yeah, her and this puppet that looks like her are just duking it out, and let's see. Yeah, let's see if Aoko can win against this puppet, right? So we're gonna continue this and do more of Witch on the Holy Night in the next one. So I'll just see you then, guys. Bye bye.